Norman ran out of the car towards the injured man. Carlos ran up behind him with a smile that was unsettlingly amused. The all-seeing eye of the camera scuttled out of the vehicle. It stopped ever so briefly to face Brody Danger for the hero's reaction shot, but quickly turned back to Norman and Carlos, seeing that was where the true carnage lay. They couldn't see where the wily man was hid because of the onion-like layers of clothes. Norman bent low to pick him up. The man screamed in pain. "Maybe we should call an ambulance. Moving him might be a bad idea," said Norman. "Look, the script as of draft 1 says I rush citizens to the hospital. I'll be damned if I'll let some asshole driving a modded out ice cream truck steal my glory. Now stop dicking about and toss him in," said Brody. If the situation wasn't one of life or death, Norman would have told Brody to go fuck himself, but it was one of life and death, and he didn't have time to. Carlos grabbed the dusty bum under an arm and ignored his screaming pleas. The fit was tight, and the Mazda wasn't equipped to handle 5 people with ease. Norman slid in the backseat with the vagrant and Carlos. The cameraman scrambled to be relevant and ended up in the passenger seat. He immediately took out the headrest so that he had better angles to shoot the carnage. The moment that the door slammed shut, Brody hit the gas. "Okay, mate, where we off to?" Brody said with extreme calm. "You don't know where we're going? I thought you read a script or something," Norman said with frustration. "I read a spec script. I know the general beats, but I don't know everything that's destined to happen." "Shit. Okay, make this turn," Norman blurted. "Get on the Kismet right here," Norman yelled with urgency. Brody nearly missed the turn to the expressway because of how fast he was going. He turned on a dime and threaded the needle getting on the exit. The cameraman turned around to record some of Norman's panicked reactions. The Mazda weaved in and out of traffic, nearly missing horrific crashes. The silhouette and blinking lights of serendipitous fate closed. "This is living, eh, boys?" said Brody with a defiant chuckle at death, and a cheeky smirk to Carlos and Norman. "Eyes on the road," Norman pleaded as the tail lights of a slow-moving truck threatened to pancake them. Brody narrowly avoided rear-ending the behemoth. "Here!" Norman yelled while frantically pointing at the exit. Brody swerved the car onto the on-ramp, and they managed to pull up on a hospital situated in the midst of a place that celebrated excess and would not sleep to slow down. "Come on!" yelled Brody as he got out of the car and helped Carlos drag the now unconscious man to the doors of the emergency room. Norman put both hands on top of his head in disbelief. He tried to breathe again, only to find that there was no time for it. Brody and Carlos left the injured man by the shuttering mechanical doors and made a break for the car. Come on, Brody said with equal measure urgency and excitement. It was rumored that Brody Danger did all of his own stunts, but after this display, Norman no longer doubted it. Whether it was the excitement of the moment or fear of having to explain what they did to authorities, Norman ran back to the car with the 3, including the cameraman whose head seemed to be eternally cocked and leaning on his machine. Norman hopped in the front seat and the Mazda peeled off into the swirling mess of nighttime colors. "Good work, lads. So another?" said Brody. "What the fuck do you mean?" "The script had us saving multiple people, which would denote at least 2. This is one hell of a dry run. This is an excellent city for vehicle-related mayhem, if I do say so myself." "Alright, boys, lock in. Where's the next hospital?" Brody asked Carlos or Norman. "What are you saying?" Norman started to say. Brody was already lining up his sights on a woman in her 20s who looked a bit tipsy with the crosshairs of his grill. "What are you?" Norman said as the speed knocked the wind from him. Brody cut the steering wheel and twisted the car so that it power slid into the girl. It was a masterful feat of driving talent, and he hadn't killed the last man going as fast as he was, but that didn't make what he did any less deviant. In the fractions of seconds that they had before impact, Norman made a choice. He chose to be the type of man that wouldn't let something like this happen instead of the passenger. He yanked the wheel, pulling with all he had to miss the woman that was too out of sorts to rightfully notice the level of danger she was in. The car squealed. They made another rotation. The Mazda smacked into a light pole, then pinballed into a brick wall in an alley. The airbags deployed. Things went white. When Norman came to, the unblinking eye of the camera was in his face, except the cameraman's poncho was ripped. With his head filled with haze, he could see the cameraman's head was fused to the camera. It had no eyes, barely a nose, and if it had a skull, it had to be cracked or stretched out of place. The thing wasn't just fused to the camera was its face. Norman leaned back in horror, but when he did, he felt two hands grab him and drag him over the broken glass through the driver's side. "Now you did it, you fucking git," said Brody, who bled from his head.